Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for tonight's event. My name is Jill Owens-Lee, and I'm a marketing manager here at Powell's Books in Portland, Oregon. Before we begin, I want to encourage you to check out our lineup of upcoming virtual events by visiting our website at powells.com or by following us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. In the coming days, we're looking forward to welcoming Lee Vandervoo on October 2nd to discuss her book, As the World Burns. Tonight, we're very honored to welcome former Congresswoman Katie Hill and Gretchen Young. Katie Hill wasn't yet 30 when she embarked on her run for Congress. By 31, she had become not only a member of Congress, but a member of congressional leadership. She managed to flip a congressional seat under decades of Republican control. Hill was the first woman to hold the seat, the first openly LGBTQ woman to be elected to Congress from California, and the first self-identified bisexual woman in Congress. She resigned from her position less than a year after entering Congress, following political sabotage by her abusive ex-husband in a scandal that began a national conversation around questions of bisexuality, domestic abuse, cyber exploitation, workplace power dynamics, and what happens when regular people who live regular lives run for office. In She Will Rise, Katie Hill is ready to equip readers for the front lines of leadership in all arenas, to guide women in becoming the warriors we need to shape this country for the better. Hill is joined in conversation by Gretchen Young, the Vice President Executive Editor at Grand Central Publishing. She has acquired and edited over 100 New York Times bestsellers, including 12 books with Caroline Kennedy and Elizabeth Alexander's Pulitzer Prize finalist, The Light of the World. A few highlights upcoming on her list are books by David Attenborough, comedian Amber Ruffin, classic Disney film star Hayley Mills, and Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette and Diablo Cody, a compendium on the Broadway musical. This evening's event will also include a Q&A. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a question. If someone has typed a question that you'd also like to know the answer to, please consider upvoting that particular question. And please consider supporting Katie Hill and Powell's by buying a copy of her book. A link to purchase her book will be shared in the chat throughout the evening. Without any further ado, please welcome Katie and Gretchen.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much, Powell's, and to all of you for being here out there to hear Katie talk about her book, She Will Rise. I'm Katie Hill's editor, and it was an honor to have had the opportunity to work with her. On top of all of Katie's other strengths, she's a super talented writer with such a natural and badass voice on the page, and she has an incredible story to tell. I knew that before I acquired the book, and especially after I read her New York Times op-ed, It's Not Over After All. It was a powerful and brave piece, and her resilience was inspiring, still is. And I knew then that I wanted to help in some small way to tell her story and to publish her mission plan for the future for all of us. Katie, how was this first publishing experience for you? And feel free to share the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Really grateful for getting paired up with an amazing editor, that's for sure. I have, over the course of working on this and since, I've spoken to many other authors who have just talked about their terrible experiences, and I was like, oh, mine wasn't like that. So, but you know, this is, some people already might know this, but my, the time from when I resigned to when I decided to write the book was very short. Then I also wanted to publish it in time for the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment passing, which was August. And I wanted to, you know, so I felt like that was really important to the kind of the mission of the book and the concepts around it. So that meant that we were on an accelerated timeline to begin with. Then, and a horrific tragedy, my younger brother passed away in January. So the book was supposed to be due, the draft was supposed to be due in February. My brother passed away in the middle of January. And so that really put, you know, I obviously needed to recover from that and be with my family. And by the time that, you know, I could get back to writing, everything had to be super, super compressed. And I remember those last few weeks were just really, really intense in terms of working nonstop. I feel like I don't remember anything else for 3 weeks except for writing and going back and forth with you and with my researcher and with you know, the other person who was helping me in terms of editing it. And but the process itself was really fascinating. I didn't know about anything else but beyond kind of, you write a book, right? Like, so it was really great. I don't know
Well,
if that is
suddenly
helpful.
I threw more curveballs at you, and you were such a trooper. Every minute she was wondering, why is there this? Wait, there's a copy edit. I have to approve the cover. Why? Here are these typeset pages. They look pretty, but I don't know what to do. So you were really great, and we did this on a crash schedule. It's
Yeah.
not typical of the way the publishing process works. So, and you did it, and you did it beautifully. So
Thank you.
I would
Well, next time I'll be sure to take my time more.
listen. I believe me. You might have stories about editors. I have crazy stories about crazy schedules and not
Yeah.
necessarily making it to the printer on time, but we did,
Uh-huh.
and we have this glorious book here.
It's beautiful.
I
Right here.
wanted to start, if you could tell the story of, when your grandfather is reading to you as a child, and how that helped sort of mold you very early on into the strong female warrior you are today. I think it sets the stage beautifully. I'm sure there are parents out there with mini warriors in the making.
Yeah. So as I talk about in the book, when I was little, I grew up on, just like many people have regular bedtime stories. My grandfather was a political science professor at UCLA, and his side passion, aside from politics, was Greek mythology. And so I grew up with these stories about, about the Greek warriors, and in particular, he focused on telling us about Athena and the Greek goddesses, and the warrior women, especially the Amazons, who were just as tough and strong, and in fact, in many cases, were the ones who saved the male figures. And I think, sorry, I just got a text that I had to brush away, but my sister and I hearing those, while we grew up, was just such a big part of how we kind of internalized that there is no fundamental difference in what men and women are capable of, and that we held it as sort of an expectation that we were going to be these, in whatever aspect of life we ultimately ended up going into, that we were going to be warrior women, and so that kind of that just held up with everything that I've done ever since then.
It sure has. I think, didn't we initially call this Centurion Call?
Yeah, we did. That was in the proposal.
Little
I think
hot inside.
the title at the end of the day ended up much better, but
Of course, absolutely. I want to read a passage that I feel really seeds the book's entire thesis, and for you, Katie, to react to all these many months after writing it. During the 3 years I've been involved in politics, running for, getting elected to, serving in, and resigning from Congress, I've learned a lot. The most important lesson: we need women to be the heroes, because now more than ever, we need saving, we need justice, and we need a better world. And it's clear that when women are in positions of power and bring our experiences and leadership to the table, a better world is actually possible. Research has shown time and again that women legislators sponsor more bills, pass more laws, and send their districts more money. This book is about what it's going to take to claim our rightful seats at every leadership table and to finally achieve real equality. My goal for the next chapter of my life is to help mobilize and support a generation of young women to not just break through those final glass ceilings one crack at a time, but shatter them all together. I want to make sure the women who are preparing to take up this fight know that it won't be easy, but that our scars make us that much tougher as we assert our own power in whatever that might be. Countless articles were written about how what happened to me might impact young people who are considering running for office, especially women and members of the LGBTQ community. An op-ed with the LA Times published the day after my final speech on the House floor was titled, "Katie Hill woke up a new generation of voters. How will her resignation affect them?" We're at a critical moment in our history, one when people are mobilized and energized, when women are calling out powerful men, and some of those men are even being held accountable. And when more people than ever before who aren't and never intended to be career politicians are stepping up and stepping in to city council, state legislatures, and Congress. What happened to me was terrible. It's not something I would wish upon my worst enemy, political or otherwise, and it was a harsh reminder of how women in power and politics still have so far to go and so much to overcome. But I will be damned if that experience deters other women from running for office and getting engaged. Instead, I hope to use what happened to me to drive women, young women especially, to question the roadblocks we face and to tear them all down and rebuild a future in which we no longer have to imagine what it would look like to have full equality and representation.
Yeah.
How does that sound
well,
for 6 months later, 7 months later?
I mean, it certainly stands up. I think that it's still the thing that I worry about the most, right? When I talk to people, one of the toughest questions to answer is just how can you, I guess, how is it that you can expect your experience not to deter other people? And really, it's a fair question, right? But I guess what I say for the most part is that if you look at what happened to me and the response that we've gotten since then, it really has shown that society has said that this is an unacceptable way to try and oust a female politician, not the other way around. I haven't come out on the other side of this as the I don't know, the shunned one, in the long run. And I think that's really telling. And for many people I've heard have said that, well, now I feel like if this happens to me, I can just say, yeah, these are my naked pictures, and that's just who I am. And I've even thought about, like, is at some point down the road, what's the best way to reclaim this, right? So I think it has started a conversation and has really caused people to think about the way that we used to put blame on women. And even, Speaker Pelosi, who we're going to talk about later, but I've been really close to her, and I consider her a mentor and someone who I respect dearly. But in the immediate aftermath, after I resigned, she said that basically this should be a warning to younger women of, like, be careful, don't put those pictures out there. And I responded to her publicly, but also I called her office and said, she's got to change that statement or fix that statement, because this should never be about shaming the woman for having, or having done that. It's the same thing with consent. You don't blame the woman for what clothes she's wearing, for what outfit she's wearing, or saying she deserved it, right? So I think that we've forced the conversation to move forward in a way from this, from my experience. And, I'm hopeful that does have a long-term impact. And I feel like it is. And I've had many people tell me that, that they feel like they can run because they know how it turned out for me, and that they need to run. But I think, it's still hard to watch, right? When we've got Trump and everything that he does, and the people that he is elevating, who just have these horrible track records around women, and it means that we've got a lot of work ahead of us.
We do. We really do. Content warning here for everyone and anyone in the audience, because there are passages in the book, Katie, about your decision to leave your husband, about his threats, the fear you felt, emotional abuse, the naked photos that went viral, and your stepping down, and that state you were in, and you wanted to kill yourself. And you write about how victims of cyber exploitation, revenge porn, often do. I was wondering if you would read a part of that, because you really take the reader to that visceral and vulnerable place of wanting to end it all.
Yeah. So I'll start with the parts of this were in the New York Times op-ed, but I kind of am discussing just how, the depths of despair that I entered when everything was happening. And I said, let me just figure it really quick. So I lay there and thought about what I'd lost, the betrayal, the people on my team and in my life who had been hurt, and although they'd done nothing wrong, everyone I'd let down, everyone who worked for me, who campaigned for me, who believed in me. The future I'd thought was in store for me was suddenly and irrevocably gone. I was grappling with and felt endlessly guilty about my own responsibility in my downfall, and also knew that there were other factors at play below the surface that people could just never understand. And those pictures, No one should have ever seen those. I didn't know how many of them existed, seeing them for the first time with the rest of the world. How could I ever face anyone again, knowing what they'd seen, what they knew? The bathwater had gone cold. The wine bottle was empty. Suddenly, and with total clarity, I just wanted it to all be over. I got up and looked for the box cutter, dripping water all over the floor. I couldn't find it. A part of my brain was saying, stop it, this is stupid. You're not going to do it. Go drain the bathtub and get your shit together. But I felt like I was out of my body, like it was moving without me. I got a paring knife, not quite as sharp as a box cutter, but I figured it would do, and got back into the cold bath. I stared at the veins in my wrists. They were so thin. They were green in the candlelight. I started tracing them with the edge of the knife, lightly at first, then pushing harder and harder. The knife was duller than I thought. It surprised me how hard I had to push to even scratch the surface. Fine red lines started to appear, and I knew that if I pushed just a tiny bit harder, I would start to bleed. A couple of droplets started to form on the surface of my skin, like when a leak is beginning to come through the ceiling, one drip at a time, but you know the crack is coming soon. This wasn't the first time I'd hovered at that edge, thinking it should all just end, knowing how I'd do it, knowing I could whenever I wanted to. A little more than a year before, I'd come so close. And then I talk about how I, my last near suicidal attempt was very shortly before the election day, when things had just gotten terrible with my husband. And after I came back home and had decided that I wasn't going to, I told him and how deeply unhappy. I'll resume with the passage. I walked into the house and told my husband what had happened and how deeply unhappy I was because of our relationship. I asked him to see a therapist, to think about the way he was acting and how toxic his behavior had become. He wouldn't hear it, and that set him off in a way I wasn't ready for, despite at least somewhat expecting it. It's hard to explain how his rages would escalate, but it's like he wasn't even there anymore. He didn't make sense, and he would yell and take the fight in the strangest directions, telling me how it was my fault that he got mad. And by the end, I'd believe it and would just keep saying, I'm sorry, can you please forgive me? Because it's the only way it ever might end. That night was no different, but this time, as it all escalated, I cried and said I just couldn't do it anymore. Instead of calming down and trying to talk and make things better, he took a gun that he kept by the side of our bed and shoved it at me, saying, here, take it. If you want to kill yourself, then why don't you just go fucking do it? I kept pushing his arms away and saying no, and he was in my face, and I was backed into a corner in the room. And in that moment, I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that I would not be okay if I stayed there, but I felt paralyzed. Eventually, he stormed out of the house with the gun. I took a sleeping pill and just prayed he wouldn't drink too much and come in and start raging again with a loaded gun in his hand. I almost locked the door to our bedroom that night, but I knew that if he tried to come in and found it locked, it would just be so much worse, and he could get in anyway. I don't remember falling asleep, but I guess I did. And then the next morning, I left. I ended up leaving and going to my mom's house, which is actually where I am right now. And I said, I basically said I just couldn't do it anymore. But at that point, he told me that if I left him, he would ruin me. And that threat was looming over my head, and it was just right before the election. And at that point, I just felt like I couldn't risk it. So I went back, and it took me another 7 months, I guess, 8 months before I left for real. So.
How hard was that to write and to relive?
It certainly reached, it's reliving trauma, right? So it's never easy. It's never easy to reread it or reshare the story, but I also think it's really important. I think as I was writing it, I actually never even planned on writing the New York Times op-ed until I was writing it sort of as my own form of therapy, of processing it and everything. And then it sort of turned into more than I was expecting. And it kind of led to me ultimately writing it as an op-ed. But I think that writing and journaling and going through these experiences through, by writing is something that comes naturally for me and is important to me. And so, I've done it with a lot of traumatizing things, and hopefully other people can, find some value in it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the book, you write about the battle in the workplace, the battle for money, the battle for our bodies, the battle at home, and the battle for safety. But before you tackle Each and every one of those areas, you have a chapter entitled Know Thy Enemy. And one part of that chapter that stuck out for me in particular, and I think you and I ended up talking about it throughout the edit, was when you discussed women supporting women or not.
Yeah.
Women on women criticism. Why, for example, 53% of white women voted for Trump in 2016? Why are we not always a united front? And second part to that question, speaking of this, is about Trump's Supreme Court justice nominee.
Mm-hmm.
You tweeted, a woman with an anti-women extremist agenda was the reason they chose her, to have power over our bodies, to call us hypocrites for not supporting another woman. Here's the thing, it's all meant to distract. No confirmation before inauguration. But can you expound on those points? Because, you know, we are mighty and fierce when we are supporting each other, but we sometimes fall short here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one, right? A lot of people, it's hard not to kind of blanket it and for me to separate out why we should support some women, but not others. And the truth is, it all comes down to, are we supporting women who subscribe to patriarchal views, or to ones that are going to advance equality for us and are going to advance the interests and the well-being of all women? I believe that women who are like the Supreme Court justice nominee and who are frankly conservative or Republican at this point at all, I feel like they have just deeply internalized sexism and misogyny, and that's the very reality that we're dealing with. I don't think that there's any way that you can hold those beliefs and truly accept that women are and should be equals. So at the end of the day, it means supporting women, not just, you know, for the sake of it, but when they're also about the same values as you. So I think that the reason, I think the very strong reason that, you know, Trump has decided he was, and it's, let's face it, it's not just Trump, it's the entire evangelical movement, the conservative movement that has put these lists in front of him. They know that it takes a little bit out from under us. If they don't have someone like Brett Kavanaugh, who has this history of sexual assault, we're not going to be able to accuse her of anything like that. They're going to be able to say, look at you hypocrites, we've nominated a woman and who has this judicial track record of, you know, excellence, and we don't, you know, you don't even want to support her. And it's like, listen, people are saying that, you know, this is making it about religion. It's not. It's making it about your willingness as a judge to impose your beliefs, and in my opinion, your deeply misogynistic beliefs onto the rest of society. And unfortunately, that's the reality that we're dealing with right now.
So true. Actually, that brings me right to my next question about you in this book and your resigning. There are overt and subtle ways our patriarchal society circumscribes our behavior and shapes our thinking. A society where a woman's mistakes receive far heavier scrutiny than those of her male counterparts. I think it's critically important for people to understand that what happened, and to some extent your role in it, are related to the whole purpose of the book and you're running for Congress in the first place. Women are held to a different standard. You acknowledge your responsibility, and in this book, and I clearly read it from cover to cover, you apologize from beginning to end, and it never seems to be enough when it's a woman, but we have men who are in political positions of power where their transgressions are brushed off. They certainly don't face the same scrutiny you did. How do we rid ourselves of this double standard?
I think that it has to come from us calling it out wherever we see it. You know, I also think that, and I don't know what this audience looks like, but often women are large portions of the audience. And I will say, you know, I kind of skipped over this part before, but I talk about this in the book, that women are among the hardest critics of other women. That was the case in women supporting female candidates. You know, in my primary, I was losing strongly, especially women over 50, to my male primary opponent. And I didn't win I didn't win that group over until after, you know, until finally it was between me or a Republican. And I think that that's we have to say, what are we looking for out of this apology? When I was noticing that people were saying, you know, reviews of the book or anything like that were saying that I didn't apologize enough, it's also coming from other women. And I find that is a fascinating, I don't know, dichotomy, right? Like these same women, I would assume, yes, they're calling for apologies from men, but what is the right amount, right? Are these people saying, like, we, you know, what is enough? What would make it enough? And I think that means that we have to really be asking ourselves, what would we be looking for from a man? And is that the same as a woman? And if not, why?
Exactly. Do you regret resigning?
It's a question that I'm kind of faced with every day, right? And there are certain moments when that question has been more difficult than others, especially when, for example, the Republican won the special election to fill my seat after we'd worked so hard to flip that seat to be held by a Democrat, where I was like, is this the right thing to do? But I think, you know, what I've had to face is that at the time, given everything that I knew, everything that I was feeling, the pressure, or the pressure I put on myself to, you know, I guess to hold myself to that higher standard, right? And to, you know, to not want to be a distraction to my colleagues, and to want to make sure that, you know, I wasn't doing damage to anybody, that resigning felt like my only real option. Now, I think if I'd been more politically experienced, if I'd been through another or a different type of scandal before and had seen that play out, it might have been a different calculation. And frankly, if I hadn't been right out of an abusive relationship, then I think all of those things could have been different. But I, you know, now I'm looking, I have to say my life is just on the whole a lot better. You know, being a member of Congress is incredibly difficult. Running for office and serving is the toughest job imaginable, and it's nonstop, right? You don't have any time off. You don't have any time to connect with friends or family. And now I'm able to do that, and I'm making up for some lost time. But there's also this, what I'm trying to navigate now is kind of this feeling of, you know, how can I still affect change? How can I still use the connections that are that I made in this, you know, effort to run for and serve in Congress, and make it meaningful, and help elevate other women to positions of power, and also help advocate for the policies that need to change. So, you know, it's a process.
Of course. Well, the second part of your book is your mission for the future. Tools for women to rise, to be leaders. You equip readers with a battle plan. It's this awesome rally cry guiding women to be the warriors we need to be. Can you talk a little bit about your way forward and about your PAC, Her Time?
Yeah. So really, the battle plan is, you know, it outlines the different kind of obstacles that we face, whether it's in the workplace or for our safety around sexual assault, domestic violence, all of those different kinds of things that, you know, women experience on a daily basis that are preventing us from achieving true equality. And for me, the bottom line comes down to, we know policies that will work to fix these things. We know at least policies that will make a substantial difference in leveling the playing field. But unless we have true champions for these issues in Congress or in any positions of power, then they're not going to get the priority attention that they need. And that means that we need to elect more women. If we don't have equal representation, then we're not going to have true equality. So the battle plan, as it were, amounts to, what do we need to do to get more women elected? And so I started an organization called Her Time, which is a political action committee that is focused on electing women up and down the ballot. We have a great slate of candidates that we're supporting this cycle. Sorry, I'm in a jet flight path for military base, so just ignore that. But basically, you know, we financially support them. We provide kind of technical assistance and you know, I guess, I don't know, strategic support for candidates. We're doing some polling on what it's going to take to actually mobilize young women, particularly women under 40, to show up, because we know that when this age group votes, that we vote overwhelmingly in a progressive direction, but what's it going to take to mobilize them to vote for women candidates? So all of that is going to, that's on the electoral side. And then once people are elected, so next term, once people are in office, then we're going to really be pushing on the advocacy side of advocating for legislative changes like the authorization of the Violence Against Women Act and the the passage of equal pay, and everything like that that's outlined within the book. So it's I think there isn't a similar organization that is so directly focused on not a single women's issue, for example, choice, but on women's issues altogether. That this is effectively a detailed outline of what it's going to take for us to systematically kind of overturn the patriarchal systems that are in place.
I love it so much. It's amazing what you're doing. One last question, I guess, before we go to questions. We didn't get to the story you write about in the book about you're having to tell Nancy Pelosi that you want to resign because she's Nancy Pelosi, but also she was your mentor, as you say, and she really took you under her wing. What was that like, and how did that play out?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the toughest call that I had to make during, as I was making all of these decisions. And, she was the first person, obviously, that I had to tell in Congress. And, she was incredibly supportive just throughout my entire time there. But I remember so vividly, I had written out what I was going to say to her because I knew that I couldn't do it on the fly. I literally typed it up and put it in front of me because I was crying the whole time. And, as I said it to her and I said that I'm going to have to step down, she said, "Oh, Katie, no, you don't have to do this. We're here for you. You can stick it out, da, 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 da." And I just felt like I didn't have any other option. But, it was kind of like telling your grandmother something like that. That's sort of the role that she felt like and she felt like a grandmotherly figure, but on the professional side, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I think she plays that role for a lot of people in Congress.
Because she put you in charge. Were you sort of chosen by her in your freshman class to sort of be, she really sought you out to be a leader?
Yeah, I mean, the freshman class elected me, but that meant that I served with her very closely on all the leadership, in a variety of different leadership meetings. I went on trips with her. She invited me on congressional delegations to Munich, to the Northern Triangle, and to the border. And so I just got to know her and spend time with her. Like, she really gave me these opportunities. She helped me get the vice chair position on oversight. To work directly with Elijah Cummings. And so there was, she invested a lot in me, and it was really tough to, I felt like I'd let her down.
Well, I think we have other questions if you're game for, let's see, let me go to this little Q&A. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So great that your mom has your back. Who else has helped you navigate through all of this?
My mom, my sister, my grandmother, the three of us, my mom, my sister, and I have just been like so deeply connected especially since my brother died. I don't know what I'd do without them. I have some friends that, I can't imagine doing this without. One in particular who's, been my best friend through all of this. I have, and even support from strangers has made a real difference, right? Like that there's, that knowing that there's this, community of people out there who are thinking about you and who respect you and who just are wishing you well. When I get random Twitter messages that say as much, or emails, or whatever, it does make it uplifts you, right? It helps you feel like there's, that it's not just the people that are going to love you no matter what, but that there are others out there as well that your story has had an impact on, or that are rooting you on, I guess. Yes, I mean, so I'm a big fan of therapy. I think that everyone should be in it, but I especially need it. And just today I was talking with my therapist about, what are the kind of, I don't know, the good habits, I guess, that I've gotten into, and the things that I need to keep doing to ensure that I stay kind of on a positive track. And one of them is like staying grounded through connections with people. And it can be anyone. It can be your family, your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues. But making a real concerted effort to not lose those ties and to not, kind of just let them slip through the cracks, which is what so many of us do all the time. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned from all of this.
Right. I think sometimes we concentrate too much on the people who didn't show up for us in troubling times, and that does give us pause. But you write also in the book about so many of your political peers and otherwise who really had your back and still do to this day. We have a question here. There are naked pictures of me on the internet from when I was a college student 20 years ago. My sister's vindictive ex-husband is aware of these, and I'm afraid they will be used to damage me, causing me to be afraid to participate in any kind of leadership, even just as PTA president of my son's elementary school. Do you have any advice for me?
Yeah, so there's probably the best central place to go to for guidance on anything like this is the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative. It's CCRI.org. And they can just walk you through pretty much all of your rights and the ways that you can protect yourself, and how you can get these images taken down if you know places that they are. Like you can actually exert your rights in advance, and they give free legal advice, all kinds of things like that. So I would definitely suggest going there. I also think that there's a way of getting out in front of this in advance, of saying, like, to have your story as to kind of have this as part of you, right? Like, you're knowing that your sister has a vindictive ex-husband, and that you shouldn't be ashamed that you have these pictures from college. I mean, look at, like, right now, right? During COVID especially, everybody's got to be sending naked pictures. We knew that even before COVID, but especially now. And it's just not something that you deserve to be kind of living in fear around. And so, owning that piece of it, and kind of being able to get ahead of it and just say, like, listen, to yourself, to your loved ones, to whomever you are ultimately going to have to lean on if they do become publicly exposed, that you're ready for it, right? Just kind of being ready for it, and knowing that this is not a reflection on you in a negative way. It's a reflection on the person who's deciding to use this against you. But in the meantime, go to ccri.org and check it out for resources on what you can actually do.
Excellent advice. We have wonderful questions here. Jane Hall and an anonymous attendee both have similar questions. One is, if you could recommend one action for women to take before the election, what would it be? Thank you for continuing the fight. How do we smash the patriarchy in the next 35 days? How do we ensure we win on November 3rd?
Okay, so this is actually like activating the sisterhood. And this is one that I think is, that we have. So, a lot of people are thinking, like, oh, I should be phone banking. There are these swing states. I should be writing postcards, etc. But the most powerful thing that you have are your own connections. And so I learned this as a candidate. When you're running for office in the first place, what you have to do first is you basically create a list of everyone you have ever known, and like what you're going to ask them for, whether it's to volunteer, whether it's for money, and if it's money, how much money, whether it's to, to knock doors for you, or to do something on your campaign. And what I would suggest is making a list of everyone you've ever known, particularly the people who live in swing states, and actually pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I just wanted to, you probably have a good sense of where they are, ideologically. And if it's women, most women at this point are pretty much overwhelmingly in support of Biden and of Democrats. Not all of them, but most of them. And so if you call them and just say, hey, I just wanted to make sure, like, I'm really passionate about this. I wanted to catch up with you, but you go through your catch up conversation, but then you go to, like, are you voting? Have you registered to vote? Do you know how you're voting? Because like, it's really complicated this year. And I've been checking in with a lot of people, and a lot of people haven't really thought about it yet, but it's like each state is different, and just talking them through their voting plan. Like, research shows that it changes somebody's likelihood of voting, and their likelihood of voting in a way that it's going to count. So not just get lost, right? Or that they show up and there's no voting place there or polling place there. It changes the numbers dramatically to have a personal connection to it. So we say that to do that for 5 people. If everyone does that for 5 people, then, you know, the numbers completely change. And so do that for your sisterhood, especially the ones that are, you know, scattered across the United States. But if your daughters, your mom, your grandma, like everyone within your within your immediate circle, make sure that they are going to vote, and that they know how to vote, and that they are going to vote up and down the ticket, and especially for women.
Yes. Great advice. So many good questions here. I want to get to everyone. What is the best you found to ignore negative comments? How do you? Best way? Yeah, the best way you found to ignore negative comments.
God, don't read them. Honestly, like that's a really tough thing to do and to condition yourself to do. But now I actually, like, I've just become such a blocker. Like, if I see something I don't like, I just block. And it's very therapeutic. And it's also, there's nothing good that comes from reading them. And I can say that now after about a year of having, well, longer of having to deal with it, much longer of having to deal with it from, you know, running, but especially since everything happened, like, no good will ever come from it. So just don't read them. And if you see something starting to head in that way, there's no reason that you need to try and pacify this person or engage with them or anything like that. Just block them.
Great. Thank you, Dawnwood. Serena Nash asks, good for you for moving forward and not allowing your past to knock you down. Any chance of you running for office in the future?
Not in the immediate future. I'll never say never, just because there's, you know, I wasn't planning on doing this in the first place, and you never know what door is going to open or what, I don't know, calling I guess you're going to get. But right now I feel very passionately that there are so many women who deserve the opportunity to have their voices elevated. Women of color too. And I don't feel like I need to be kind of reinserting myself when there are so many who haven't yet had that chance. And so I want to play the role of supporting other women right now. And if there comes a time down the road, I'm not going to write it off.
What happened to you was not just something that happens to women in politics or business, but it is also something that happens to women in the military. What federal laws or reforms are needed to stop this?
Yeah, well, we don't have a federal law at all that prevents or that is focused on cyber exploitation. You're right, though. In the military, it should have its own specific. Cyber exploitation needs to be considered a form of sexual abuse. It's that simple. And it needs to be prosecuted accordingly, both on the military and the civilian sides. There are actually some really great champions that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about Jackie Spear in particular. She has authored the SHIELD Act, and I always forget exactly what it stands for, but basically it's stopping harassment. It specifically bans revenge porn effectively. But she is also one of the highest ranking members of the Armed Services Committee and has advocated on every issue for women in the military, including, you know, ensuring there's access to birth control, military sexual assault. And I know that she has been advocating for this issue too. But the biggest thing is that it needs to be a federal law across the board.
Yes, thank you, Spence Williams. Marisa Fox asks, given your experience with an abusive husband, today's news about Brad Parscale on top of a myriad of Trump appointees who battered their wives, plus the shocking statistic that half of all female homicide were killed by a partner. What can we do besides reinstating BAWA to empower survivors of domestic abuse and stop this horrifying American epidemic?
Yeah, well, there's so much needs to be done in terms of education around domestic violence. Many people often are just not aware of the early signs of what might be happening behind closed doors. And and coercive control. So the chapter in my book that covers specifically domestic violence is honestly probably the most important one. And we've listed resources on the book's website, shewillrisebook.com, that you don't even have to, not that I should say this in front of my editor, but you don't even have to buy the book to get the resources, because I think they're that important. Because it's about everybody knowing and understanding what domestic abuse looks like, how they can kind of recognize it within their own relationships, but also if someone they love, they think that someone they love might be in that kind of a situation, and how people can have the resources they need to be able to get out of a relationship like that, right? But the truth is, there is a common type, right, that we're seeing within the Trump administration, and it has to do, the abusive personality type is deeply, deeply ingrained within misogyny, and that's never isolated. That's never just one side or the other. And so it's yet another reason that we need to, hold on. Sorry, my dad was calling me. It's yet another reason that we have to make sure that more women are in power, and that we're able to replace misogynistic men with women who really understand the impact of this, and can ensure that the resources are there and the laws are there to protect survivors and to hold men accountable. Because that's the other thing. Domestic violence is still a misdemeanor in most places, and that's just completely unacceptable.
Unacceptable. Thank you. Cam Montgomery Jr. asks, what do you make of the incredible backlash Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is receiving on social media after publicly announcing his support for Biden-Harris?
I mean, I guess it's a bummer, but not unexpected. You know, I think that when a celebrity that has been, that's popular, just think about how much backlash Taylor Swift got for, telling people to vote for the Democrat in the Senate race. And I think I'm sure she's getting it again, but basically the whole country scene has disowned her because she's, she's not keeping silent politically anymore. And I think that you say, like, just shut up and sing, or, we don't want to just play football or basketball or whatever. And, ultimately, I think that celebrities of all kinds, athletes, et cetera, are recognizing that the power of their voice is needed right now. And if people don't like it, then F off,
Yeah. David Williams asks, with all the talk about the Supreme Court nominee and her religion, how would you describe your religion or spirituality or morality or whatever you call it, or none of the above?
Yeah, I consider myself spiritual. So when you are elected to Congress, you actually have to name your religion for basically for this. I don't know what they even put it in, some book or something. And I was one of a very small number. There was the Free Thought Caucus is what it was called. I obviously didn't start it, but I was part of it, where it was a very small number of us who were atheist, agnostic, or some other particular religion. And when I was asked to choose what mine was, I said I'm spiritual. I have a connection with, my own connection with what I believe is a higher power. But it's also not subscribing to a particular religion, that I think is man-made and has flaws, particularly around implementation.
Right. An anonymous attendee asks, as a man, what do you wish your male colleagues had done for you?
I guess, honestly, I think the biggest thing would be across the board, more of my colleagues, both men and women, just standing up for me more, and more vocally. I think that would have been, that could have made a big difference. And one of my strongest, allies, I guess, vocal allies, was certainly not a political ally, but it was Matt Gaetz, who, God, there's a million issues with him, but he he at least stood up for me. And some of the people that I was closest to in Congress, friends, people I even still consider friends now, stayed quiet because of the concern of kind of political retribution. And I think that that's a real bummer. So it takes courage to stand up for somebody when you know that you might have your own backlash. But if you think it's the right thing to do, then you need to do it. And that goes for both men and women.
I think this is the last question. Because of these times, are you doing Zoom events to keep the momentum going for her time?
Yeah, so we've been doing Zoom events. We're also, right now, we're so focused on really, supporting the candidates that we've endorsed. So a lot of it's just happening via newsletter, email and social media. We're trying to kind of decide what we might do in the final stretch. So if you want to kind of stay in the loop on her time, just go to her-time.com. And you can sign up for our emails, and we'll be sure to let you know. Like we're sending out blasts about when our candidates have certain events too, and that's going to be picking up as things get closer to Election Day.
Amazing. I think I asked everyone's questions. I hope I did. Forgive me if I did not. If there are no other questions, I don't know if Katie, you want to end with anything, but this has been amazing. And thank you all for your questions and for coming today and listening to Katie.
Yeah. No, I just thank you. Thank you both to Powell's and to you, of course, Gretchen, and to everyone who tuned in. I think the biggest thing that I'd end it with is that things can seem really daunting and hopeless right now, but they're not. And I'm really excited about, nervous, of course, but excited about November and the results of the election. We have to work our butts off, but I think that we're going to see some real change, and the fight is far from over, even once the results are in, and hopefully that they are the way that we want them to be, both in the House and the Senate and in the White House and the Senate, but also keeping the House. But we can't afford to just sit in our own despair right now. It's not an option for us. This is the moment that we have to be activated and really fighting on a personal level. It's not just about those random Facebook posts or even the calls to strangers. It's about how are you really connecting with the people that you care about and you love, and making sure that they're with you on these issues and that they're with you on the importance of being civically engaged right now. So, keep up the fight.
Get involved. I did get one more question, and I'm serious. I did not make this question up. Someone has asked, how do we buy the book?
Well, Powell's is going to put the link on.
The link is in the chat.
Thank you, Jane Hall.
Thank you all.
The link to buy the book is in the chat. Thanks to everyone so much for joining us for tonight's event. It was such a pleasure to host Katie, Gretchen, and to welcome all of you. Please consider purchasing a copy of She Will Rise and look in the chat for the link. We look forward to seeing you at another one of our events soon. Take care until then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.